There are things on the graveyard shift you aren't meant to see. My name is Julian Vance, and I work the 3 a.m. highway cleanup crew along Route 9 in upstate New York. 3 weeks ago, my partner, Marcus, and I were clearing a ditch near mile marker 42 when our high beams caught a faded midnight blue 1994 sedan. It was rotted into the earth and covered in moss, untouched for decades. Yet when Marcus pried open the door, the interior smelled like fresh pine air freshener. Resting inside the dusty glove box was a silver fossil watch with a custom engraving from his father. Marcus turned pale as a sheet, dropping his flashlight. It was the exact watch he had been wearing on his own wrist less than 10 minutes prior. The silence of Route 9 at that hour is heavy, broken only by the low rumble of our idling flatbed and the wind whipping through the pines. I stared from Marcus's wrist to the glove box, my brain scrambling for a logical explanation. But his sleeve was rolled up, and his bare skin was empty, showing only a pale tan line where the heavy silver band should have been. The vehicle itself looked like a tomb. Its frame sagged into the mud as if it had been rotting since the year it was manufactured. Yet the air inside the cabin was warm and smelled faintly of Marcus's specific brand of cheap cologne. When I reached in to touch the steering wheel, the vinyl was freezing, but a strange, low-frequency hum vibrated through the metal, rattling my teeth and making the hairs on my arms stand straight up. We didn't finish the shift that night. Marcus choked out an excuse, threw the truck into reverse, and tore down the asphalt, leaving the rusted sedan swallowed by the shadows. I tried to tell myself it was a cruel prank played by the day crew, a highly elaborate and impossible stunt. But deep down, the absolute terror in Marcus's eyes told me that whatever was happening on that highway had just crossed a terrifying line. My flashlight beam flickered unsteadily against the cracked dashboard, illuminating a thick layer of undisturbed grime that should have retained our fingerprints. Yet the surface remained flawlessly smooth, as if our physical contact with the object was being actively erased by the vehicle itself. The digital clock on the dashboard, completely disconnected from any visible battery source, suddenly began to rapidly count backward through the years, its dim green luminescence casting an eerie glow over our trembling hands, before permanently freezing on the exact hour and minute of Marcus's birth. The ride back to the maintenance depot was conducted in a suffocating, absolute silence that felt far more oppressive than the howling wind outside our cracked truck windows. Marcus sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead into the headlight's beam with a completely blank expression, his fingers tightly interlocking over his bare wrist where the heavy silver watch had defined his appearance for nearly a decade. Every time I attempted to initiate a conversation or rationalize the impossible geometry of what we had just witnessed, he would merely shake his head with a slow, mechanical rhythm, whispering that some things are woven into the asphalt and cannot be unraveled without destroying the person who looks too closely. When we finally pulled into the brightly lit gravel lot of the county yard, he stepped out of the cab without retrieving his personal gear, walking directly toward his personal vehicle like a sleepwalker navigating a familiar room in total darkness. I watched his taillights vanish down the main road, leaving me alone with the ticking engine of our work truck and an overwhelming sensation of being watched from the surrounding tree line. I spent the remainder of the early morning hours sitting in the break room, clutching a lukewarm cup of black coffee, while trying to convince myself that the watch in the glove box was merely a replica, an incredibly precise counterfeit designed to unhinge our sanity. But the lingering scent of that cheap pine air freshener seemed to have transferred onto my own high-visibility jacket, a persistent reminder that the midnight blue sedan was not just an abandoned piece of junk, but a predatory entity that had successfully identified its first target. The next calendar night felt entirely different, blanketed by a dense, clinging fog that swallowed the beams of my amber utility lights and reduced the visible world to a few feet of cracked white paint on the asphalt. Marcus had called out just before midnight, his voice sounding thin, distant, and hollow, like he was speaking from the bottom of an old concrete well, leaving me to manage the desolate sweep of Route 9 completely on my own. The cab of the maintenance truck felt massive and drafty without his heavy presence beside me, and every creak of the chassis made me jump as I crawled along the shoulder at 15 miles per hour. As I approached the vicinity of mile marker 45, a spot characterized by a steep drop-off into a swampy ravine, my fog lights caught the distinct, boxy silhouette of a car jutting out from the overgrown weeds. My breath hitched in my throat as I pulled over, the engine whining in protest while I kept the high beams locked onto the vehicle. It was another midnight blue sedan, identical in its rusted decay to the one from the previous night, down to the missing hubcaps and the fractured passenger side mirror. Stepping out into the damp, freezing air, the absolute stillness of the forest felt artificial, as if the local wildlife had deliberately fled the area to avoid whatever had materialized in the ditch. I walked toward it with a leaden, reluctant stride, my work boots sinking into the wet mud while a sharp, metallic taste coated the back of my tongue. When I reached the driver's side door, I noticed the window was rolled down just an inch, and sticking out of the gap was a small laminated card that instantly shattered my remaining sense of reality. It was my old library card from high school, complete with my teenage signature and the faded barcode, an item I had distinctly lost over 15 years ago during a summer trip to the public library in my hometown. I hooked my fingers into the window gap and forced the door open with a loud, protesting screech of rusted hinges, immediately noticing that the interior was entirely free of the dust and cobwebs that coated the exterior panels. Sitting squarely in the center of the driver's seat was an old, leather-bound notebook that I recognized instantly as my personal journal from my freshman year of college. A private diary I kept locked in a fireproof safe at the bottom of my closet at home. Shaking uncontrollably, I reached into the cabin to grab it, the air inside feeling incredibly pressurized and cold, like stepping into an industrial freezer in the dead of summer. As my fingers brushed the leather cover, the vehicle's built-in AM radio suddenly clicked on by itself, emitting a low, rhythmic pulsing sound that perfectly matched the accelerated tempo of my own heartbeat. I flipped the notebook open to the very last page, expecting to see my messy, youthful handwriting, but instead found a single sentence written repeatedly from top to bottom in fresh, wet blue ink that looked exactly like my current handwriting style. The words read, "You are already sitting inside," and as I read them, a terrible, localized vibration shook the car, forcing me to drop the journal and stumble backward into the cold mud of the highway shoulder. The sheer force of panic sent me scrambling back up the muddy embankment toward the idling maintenance truck, my boots slipping on the slick grass as the rhythmic pulsing from the sedan's radio echoed behind me like a physical weight. I threw myself into the driver's seat, locked the doors with a frantic slap of my palm, and slammed the transmission into drive, forcing the heavy truck to roar as it surged back onto the deserted blacktop of Route 9. My headlights cut through the swirling patches of low-lying fog, but my focus was entirely shattered, pulled toward the large rectangular rearview mirror mounted above the dashboard. Through the rear glass, I could see the dark outline of the ditch fading into the mist. But then, a pair of dull, amber-colored headlights flickered to life directly behind me, rising smoothly from the exact spot where the rusted sedan sat immobilized. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit because those lights weren't stationary. They were accelerating with an impossible, silent swiftness, maintaining a perfectly level trajectory as if floating just inches above the broken yellow lines of the highway. I pressed my foot harder against the accelerator, the truck's engine screaming as the needle climbed past 70 miles per hour, an incredibly dangerous speed for a heavy utility vehicle on these winding, unlit back roads. Yet, no matter how hard I pushed the engine or how sharply I navigated the blind curves, the twin spheres of amber light remained exactly 50 feet behind my bumper, casting a sickening, pale glow into the cab that illuminated the frantic, terrified expression on my face. The interior of my own truck began to change as the pursuit continued through the suffocating darkness of the forest, the temperature plunging rapidly until my breath formed thick, white plumes in the enclosed space. The digital display on my modern dashboard began to scramble, the numbers twisting into unfamiliar, ancient-looking glyphs before the entire screen went completely dark, leaving only the amber reflection from the pursuing vehicle to light the cabin. That was when I noticed a faint, rhythmic tapping originating from the passenger side of the truck, a sound like fingernails gently clicking against the glass of the window, accompanied by a soft, localized scent of old paper and damp earth. I refused to turn my head to look, keeping my eyes locked onto the road ahead, but the side mirror caught a brief, terrifying glimpse of the passenger seat, where a thick layer of blue ink was slowly bleeding upward through the vinyl upholstery. The realization that the anomaly was actively bleeding into my current reality made my hands shake so violently I could barely keep the steering wheel steady as the highway seemed to stretch out into an endless, repeating loop of identical pine trees. Just as the psychological pressure reached a breaking point where I felt ready to simply pull over and surrender, the distant horizon began to tinge with a faint, bruised purple hue, signaling the approach of dawn. The moment the very first sliver of morning light touched the top of the trees, the amber headlights behind me vanished instantly, leaving the road behind me completely empty and cold. The arrival of daylight offered no comfort, as the lingering chill from that infinite highway loop seemed to burrow deep into my bones, refusing to dissipate even under the bright fluorescent lights of the main office. When I pulled the utility truck back into the county maintenance depot at 6 a.m., my hands were still locked in a rigid, frozen grip around the steering wheel, my muscles aching from the sheer physical tension of the night. I bypassed the time clock entirely and walked straight to my supervisor's office, determined to hand in my resignation and walk away from Route 9 forever, regardless of the financial fallout. But the moment I stepped inside the administrative building, an unnatural, heavy stillness hung over the cubicles, a silent vacuum that felt entirely uncharacteristic for a bustling county yard during a shift change. My supervisor wasn't at his desk. Instead, resting directly in the center of his green blotter pad, was a pristine, unblemished piece of heavy cardstock with my home address neatly typed across the top. Beneath the text lay a tarnished metal key attached to a plastic fob from a 1994 automotive manufacturer, looking completely out of place against the modern office decor. A sudden, sharp realization hit me like a physical blow when I noticed that the ambient air in the hallway carried the distinct, unmistakable odor of damp earth and old, decaying paper. I backed out of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs, and sprinted across the gravel lot toward my personal vehicle, desperate to find an explanation or a safe place to hide. As I approached my parked sedan in the far corner of the employee lot, the surrounding world seemed to lose its color, the vibrant morning sky draining into a dull, monochromatic gray that felt suffocatingly bleak. I reached for my keys, but my gaze was instantly drawn to the driver's side window of my own personal car, where a thick layer of frost had formed on the glass despite the mild late spring temperature. Traced clearly into the center of the icy condensation was the outline of a handprint, but it wasn't mine. The fingers were impossibly long, thin, and precisely mirrored the exact size of the handprint I had left on the mud-covered window of the highway sedan. When I unlocked the door and pulled it open, a wave of freezing air rolled out from the interior, accompanied by the low, mechanical hum that had haunted my nights on the asphalt. Resting perfectly on the passenger seat was a small, battery-operated tape recorder from the mid-90s, its plastic wheels turning in a slow, rhythmic circle as it played an absolute, dead silence that was louder than any scream. I reached down with a trembling hand to press the stop button, but before my fingers could make contact, the machine emitted a single, crisp click, and a voice that sounded exactly like my own began to recount my deepest, most private childhood memories in a flat, monotone whisper. The recording didn't stop there. It began describing exactly what I was wearing at this very moment, detail by detail, proving that the anomaly had officially left the boundaries of Route 9 and followed me home. The tape recorder's flat, robotic mimicry of my own voice shattered whatever remained of my resolve, forcing me to slam my car door shut and flee the county yard on foot, abandoning my vehicle entirely. I walked for hours along the residential sidewalks of my own neighborhood, hoping the mundane sight of neatly manicured lawns, passing school buses, and ordinary people would break the psychological chokehold of the highway. But by the time dusk began to paint the sky in deep shades of bruised purple, the familiar suburban streets began to subtly distort, the concrete sidewalks gradually giving way to gravel and patches of wild, overgrown weeds. I turned a corner, expecting to see my own front porch, but instead found myself standing directly on the shoulder of Route 9, the towering pine trees closing in around me like the bars of a massive, living cage. The air grew instantly freezing, thick with the scent of damp earth and old paper, as a pair of dull amber headlights flickered to life just 50 feet ahead of me through the rising evening fog. Sitting squarely beneath the rusted metal frame of mile marker 42 was the midnight blue sedan, its engine idling with a heavy, wet rhythm that sounded exactly like a person breathing in deep, exhausted gasps. The driver's side door creaked open with an agonizingly slow, mechanical screech, revealing a completely pristine interior that seemed to pull at the very fabric of my surroundings, warping the trees and the asphalt toward its open cabin. A profound, inescapable realization settled over me as I watched the interior light of the sedan pulse in perfect synchronization with my own frantic heartbeat, realizing that this vessel was never meant to destroy me, but to absorb me. I looked down at my hands and gasped. My fingernails were completely stained with a deep, wet blue ink that was slowly seeping upward beneath my skin, tracing the exact pathways of my veins like a map. Every memory I possessed, from my childhood to the terrifying events of the past 3 weeks, felt like it was being actively unspooled from my mind and projected onto the blank, waiting dashboard of the vehicle. I took a step forward, not out of fear or coercion, but out of a strange, magnetic necessity, realizing that the version of me walking this highway was already becoming an echo of the past. As my boots crossed the threshold and my fingers gripped the freezing vinyl of the steering wheel. The car door clicked shut behind me with a definitive airtight seal that silenced the wind outside forever. The radio immediately hummed to life, tuning into a clear, crisp frequency that broadcasted the sound of a modern maintenance truck driving past mile marker 42 in the distance. I reached up and adjusted the rearview mirror, watching a new highway worker approach the ditch with a flashlight, and realized with an absolute, chilling certainty that I was now waiting for him to find his own watch. My name is Jake Marlowe. I'm from Mesa, Arizona. And I need you to understand something. I'm not crazy. I've been a mechanic for 15 years. I fix things. I understand cause and effect, problem and solution. But what happened to me on the night of November 14th broke something in how I see the world, and I don't think it's ever going to mend. I was driving back from a job in Flagstaff, solo, exhausted, running on maybe 4 hours of sleep from the past 2 days. The route was simple, I-40 westbound back to Phoenix. Should have taken about 5 hours if traffic cooperated. Somewhere around the 2-hour mark, my GPS, which had been perfectly reliable for the 3 years I'd owned it, suddenly recalculated. The calm female voice told me to take exit 247 in 6 miles. I glanced at the screen. There was no exit 247 marked on any map I'd ever seen. The route showed a thin gray line cutting off the highway onto unmarked county roads, ending at a small icon that looked like a fuel pump. I almost ignored it, but the yawn hit me like a wave, and there was nothing open for another 40 miles according to my paper atlas, the one I kept in the glove box for old time's sake. So I took the exit. The GPS screen flickered twice as I turned. Not a normal glitch, something deeper, like the whole system was reconsidering whether it wanted to guide me here or was afraid to. The voice said, recalculating 3 times in the space of a minute. Then it went silent. Just the little arrow on the gray line moving forward, counting down miles I didn't want to travel. I should have turned back. Every instinct I had as a mechanic, as someone who spent his life reading machines and understanding when something's wrong, was screaming at me to turn around. But there was a tiredness in my bones that felt heavier than fear. The road behind me had simply ended when I checked the rearview mirror after the first mile. Not dark, not empty. Gone, like it had been erased. The highway was somewhere back there, but the road itself had consumed itself. Trees and black nothing swallowing what came before. And my headlights were the only thing pushing back the dark in both directions now. The trees weren't right. They were the right kind of trees for this part of Arizona. Mesquite, some juniper, the usual scrub. But they were wrong in their arrangement. Too close together, too vertical. Their branches reached straight up and then curved inward at the top, like fingers slowly closing around something. When my headlights hit them, the bark looked wet, glistening, though it hadn't rained in weeks. I passed one that had a faded piece of plastic ribbon wrapped around its trunk, the kind used at crime scenes, hanging limp and still despite my car moving through perfectly still air. I didn't stop to look. The station appeared slowly, which doesn't make sense because it was only half a mile away when I first saw it. But the closer I got, the slower it seemed to materialize, like the building was being drawn into existence by my headlights rather than illuminated by them. The amber glow pulsed. Not the way fluorescent lights flicker when they're dying. The way a heartbeat pulses. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic, and the rhythm was getting faster as I approached. I could feel it in my chest before I heard it. I pulled into the lot. The gravel crunched under my tires, but the sound was wrong. Too loud, too present, like the silence that came before was being devoured by the noise of my own arrival. I stopped the car, killed the engine, sat there with my hands on the wheel. The sign out front said, "Mix gas and go," in faded red letters, half the neon tubes dead, so it read something like, "Mix ga and go." The pumps looked ancient, rotary dials, analog readouts, the kind you'd see in a museum. There were no prices posted anywhere, no menu boards, no credit card logos, nothing but that flickering sign and the hum of fluorescent tubes visible through the dirty front windows. And the pump farthest from the door, the one with the cracked analog readout, had a number on it I couldn't read from this distance. But I knew, somehow, it was already counting up, waiting, already past zero, even though no car had stopped there in years. I pulled up to pump number 2 because the other 3 looked worse. Rusted handles, cracked displays, one that looked like it had been hit by lightning and just kept working anyway, somehow, which was worse than if it had given up entirely. Mine seemed functional enough, or at least functional enough to believe in at 1 in the morning when you haven't slept in 2 days and your brain is running on fumes and bad decisions. I killed my engine, sat there for a second, listening. Total silence outside. No wind, no insects, no distant highway sound. Just the absence of noise like a held breath. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of the blood moving through your own head. When I opened the door, the silence didn't break. It just shifted, made room for the small sounds of my boots on gravel, my jacket zipper, the creak of my shoulder as I stretched after the long drive. And then nothing again. I walked toward the station and the door was already open. Not ajar, open. The gap wide enough to see the darkness inside, the amber glow beyond it, the shape of someone standing behind a counter waiting for me to walk through. The bell above the door didn't ring. It just made a sad, mechanical clunk, like a throat being cleared, like something was pretending to be a doorbell while knowing it had forgotten how to be one. The guy behind the counter was in his late 50s, wearing a white t-shirt that had gone gray at the collar, jeans, work boots. He had this smile when I walked in, not creepy, not friendly. It was the kind of smile someone gives you when they know something about you that you don't know about yourself yet, like when your doctor calls you into a private room instead of delivering news over the phone. His eyes were gray, not blue-gray or hazel gray, gray like ash, like cement, like the color things turn when they've been burned and don't remember being any other way. He looked at me for maybe 3 full seconds before speaking, and in those 3 seconds, I had the distinct impression that he was reading me, scanning back and forth across my face like a searchlight, cross-referencing whatever he found there against something in his own memory. "How do I pay?" I asked, because there was no card reader visible on the counter, just him and a glass case full of beef jerky, and an ancient calculator with a cracked screen that showed numbers that didn't make sense. Negative numbers, numbers with too many digits. He pointed toward the pumps through the window with one finger, slow, deliberate. "Same as last time," he said. I froze. "What?" He blinked, hard, like something had just snapped in his brain. I heard it, a sound like a rubber band breaking somewhere behind his eyes. And then his expression reset, that knowing smile gone and replaced by something blank and mechanical. Never mind. I don't know why I said that. Card machines outside, left side of the building. The fluorescent lights buzzed so loud it felt like they were inside my skull. The hum had a pattern, rhythmic, almost like a second hand sweeping around a clock face, over and over, stopping and starting. But it wasn't a clock. Sometimes there were long pauses, 3 or 4 seconds of pure electric silence. And then the ticking would resume, but faster, like something catching up, like something that had been waiting was suddenly in a hurry. He just looked at me with that same knowing expression and waited. I went back outside. The card machine was exactly where he said, a standalone terminal on a post, ancient, like a relic from a time before anyone remembered what electricity was supposed to look like. The screen was glowing, but the numbers on it were wrong. They kept flickering between prices that should have been current, 3 something per gallon, and prices that hadn't existed in 30 years, something like 89 cents. I swiped my card. The machine made a sound, not a beep, something thicker like a mouth swallowing, and the screen went dark for a full second before coming back with select fuel type in green text that seemed too bright, too alive, like it was lit from inside by something that wanted to keep burning. I selected regular unleaded. The pump clicked on with a sound like a bone cracking. I started pumping. I don't know how much I put in. I wasn't watching. I was watching the door of the station, making sure that man wasn't coming out with that ash-gray smile. Somewhere behind me, the fluorescent lights kept humming their broken rhythm, kept ticking and pausing and ticking faster. And the man behind the counter stood motionless with his hand on the glass case and his eyes on me through the dirty window. And I could feel him smiling, even though I couldn't see it anymore. Could feel the shape of that smile pressing against the glass like a hand against a fogged mirror. And I knew in the way you know things in nightmares before they happen, that he was still smiling when I finally put the nozzle back and walked away. When I was done, I went back inside to pay. The man was still there, exactly where I'd left him, not even his posture different. Same hands on the counter, same feet planted, same head tilted slightly like a dog hearing a sound it can't identify. He looked at me with that same unsettling half smile, and I noticed for the first time that his teeth were wrong. Not discolored or crooked. Wrong the way a doll's teeth are wrong. Too even, too white, too perfectly spaced, like they'd been added later and didn't quite match the shape of his mouth. He smiled, and the smile didn't move the rest of his face. The muscles around his eyes stayed still. His cheeks didn't rise. It was just a mouth, performing the action of a smile without any of the machinery behind it. I told him I'd pumped. He just nodded, slow, like the nod was being transmitted from somewhere else and arriving delayed. And then he reached under the counter and came back with a handful of coins and set them on the glass between us. $1.75. I looked at the coins, quarters, dimes, a couple of nickels, and something felt deeply wrong. The coins were warm, not the warmth of a pocket or a palm. They were warm the way things are warm when they've been sitting in sunlight. But there was no sunlight. There had never been any sunlight in that building. And the coins were laid out on cold glass, and they should have been cold, but they weren't. They felt like they'd been holding on to something for a very long time. I walked back to my car, and that's when I noticed the radio had gone to static. I'd been playing a country station out of Flagstaff, something low and twangy that helped me stay awake. Now there was nothing. White noise, a low hiss that occasionally modulated into what sounded almost like voices, just barely below the threshold of comprehension, like someone speaking a language I almost knew from a room I couldn't quite reach. I turned it off, sat in silence. Then I looked at the pump. The analog readout was frozen at $47.03. $47. I had been driving for 2 hours and 40 minutes. My tank had been at 3/4 when I left Flagstaff. There was no way I needed $47 worth of gas, not even close. The number didn't change. The pump didn't beep or flash or do any of the things a functioning pump does when it's done. It just sat there, humming, the little analog dial holding steady at a number that made no sense, and I realized the pump wasn't waiting for me to finish. It had already taken what it wanted, and the number on the screen wasn't a running total, but a final bill, a receipt signed in my name for something I never ordered and never received. I just stood there with my hand on the handle like it was a gun I didn't know how to put down. I looked around the parking lot. Empty. Not just empty. It felt emptied, cleared and kept clear by something that didn't want company, but didn't want to be alone either. No other cars, no cigarette butts or candy wrappers, no bugs on the lights, no birds in the trees, nothing living, nothing dead. Just clean asphalt under buzzing light, and my car and the dark trees pressing in like a crowd gathered to watch something they knew was about to happen, and the pump reading $47 like a dead man's EKG flatline. I got in my car. I didn't finish the transaction. The card machine glowed wrong green, screen saying, "Thank you, come again." And I knew my card had already been charged, that this whole trip had been a purchase, and I was the thing that had been purchased. I just drove, left the pump still running, the nozzle still in my tank, the man watching from inside the window with that smile. I knew, the way you know when someone's behind you, that he had always been watching, that watching was the whole point of him, of this place, of this rotting corner of nowhere that existed only because someone had to keep the door open and the lights on until the right car came along and the right transaction finally went through. I looked in my rearview mirror the entire time, expecting lights, expecting the man to come running. But the station disappeared and the road stayed empty and the trees closed in behind me like a wound healing in reverse. And the only sound was my heartbeat and the faint hiss of static from the radio that I could not bring myself to turn back on. I drove for maybe 10 minutes. Hard to say, time had started to feel unreliable, before I noticed the headlights behind me. A pickup truck, maybe half a mile back, doing exactly my speed, maintaining exactly my distance. I tapped my brake. The headlights didn't dim. I tapped it again. Nothing. The truck didn't slow down, didn't pull off, didn't change lanes. There was only one lane after all. I accelerated to 65. The truck matched. 70. 75. The needle climbed and the headlights stayed exactly where they were, a fixed point of white light in my mirror that never got closer and never fell back. I remember the color of the truck. Dark blue, maybe navy, the paint job dull and oxidized under the wash of its own headlights, like something that had been sitting in a field for years. The make was indistinct. Could have been a Chevy, could have been a Ford, could have been something that wasn't made anymore. My hands were shaking on the wheel. Sweat ran down the sides of my face, even though the AC was on, and it was November, and cold enough to see my breath. Then it happened. The truck accelerated, fast, sudden, a surge of speed that closed the gap between us in seconds. It blew past me like I was sitting still, fishtailing slightly as it did, rear end swinging out before correcting. I watched it rocket ahead, both brake lights blazing, and then it slowed, cruised, set back to exactly my speed. I was close enough now to see details. The truck bed was empty, no cover, no bed liner, just bare metal. The spare tire was mounted under the bed, covered in mud, and the passenger window was down. A figure was leaning out, one hand on the door frame, the upper half of their body pitched forward into the wind like they were straining to hear something, or say something, or get a better look at something specific. I couldn't make out their face. It wasn't dark. There was enough ambient light from the moon and my headlights. But the face was indistinct, like a photo taken through frosted glass. The shape was there. The outline was human, but the features were gone. They stared at me as the truck moved ahead, that silhouette fixed on my car, and then the truck's brake lights came on hard and it pulled off the road. Not onto a driveway or a side road, just off, into the trees, like it had reached its destination. I watched until the taillights disappeared. Then I drove, 80 miles an hour the rest of the way into Albuquerque, not stopping, not slowing, burning through a quarter tank in 45 minutes just to feel like I was getting somewhere. I arrived in Albuquerque at 4 a.m. and went directly to my buddy Derek's apartment in the Northeast Heights. I knew his buzzer code and let myself in, sat on his couch, and waited. He came out in his underwear, half asleep, and I told him everything. The station, the man, the change, the pump, the truck. He listened without interrupting, which wasn't like him. Derek was always the guy with the comment, the joke, the interruption. He listened, and then he got his laptop and started searching. He looked up the coordinates I'd given him. I'd noted them on my phone during the drive because some part of my brain, even in that state, had thought, document this. He searched for 3 minutes and went quiet. He turned the screen toward me. The station had been real. Mix Gas and Go had been a real business, had operated from 1971 to 2019, had closed due to declining revenue in the owner's health. The pumps had been removed in 2017. The building had been sold to a land developer who never broke ground and eventually lost it to the county for unpaid taxes. There was a photograph of the location from 2020, empty lot, trees growing up through old concrete foundations, no building, no pumps, no sign, no lights, nothing. There was a forum thread from 2018 where someone described the same thing. A night drive, a detour, lights that shouldn't be there, a man who smiled like he knew them. Another post from 2022, another from early 2024, all describing the same station, the same man, the same smile. None of them had ever paid, none of them had ever gone inside, and none of them, as far as I could tell from reading, had checked their bank accounts. I checked mine. $47 had been withdrawn from my checking account on November 14th. The transaction description said, Mix Gas and Go, Albuquerque, New Mexico. The timestamp was 1:47 a.m. I had never stopped pumping. I had never completed the transaction. I had pulled the nozzle out of my car and driven away. And $47 had left my account anyway. Derek and I sat in his apartment in silence. Neither of us knew what to say. Around 6 a.m, he made coffee, and we just drank it and didn't talk. At 8, I drove back to Phoenix. I took the I-40 the whole way. I didn't take exit 247. I made sure to watch for it and I passed it, and I watched in my mirror as the road that shouldn't exist fell away behind me. But I could still feel it. The pull, like a hook in the base of my skull, tugging gently, persistently, always toward the north. I started having dreams about the station 3 days later. In the dreams, I'm always arriving. The lights are always on. The man is always behind the counter. And every time, he says the same thing. Same as last time. Last time, not as always or as before. Last time, like there was a specific previous occasion, like this was a return visit and I simply didn't remember. I stopped driving at night. Then I stopped driving long distances altogether. Then I started staying home. Then I started leaving every light on in the house because the dark had started feeling like it had texture, like something was in it, pressing, patient, waiting for me to close my eyes and stop watching. My mechanic shop is 40 minutes from my house, and I carpool now. My cousin drives. I watch the road the entire time, every single time, because if I look away for even a second, I feel it. The detour pulling at me, the soft voice of a GPS recalculating toward something that shouldn't exist, toward a building that isn't there, toward a man who smiled at me like I was expected, and I was late, and I had always been coming back. Last week I checked my bank statement again, a new charge, 3 cents, from Mix Gas and Go. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. I was asleep. Every light in my house was on. I was asleep, and it was the middle of the night, and something, drew 3 cents from my account. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's buying something or paying something or reminding me that I'm still on a tab I don't remember running. But I know this, the pump is always running. It was running when I got there. It was running when I left. And it's still running now, pulling $47 worth of something out of me one way or another, 1 cent at a time, one night at a time, like a subscription to a place that doesn't exist anymore, but has never stopped waiting at the edge of the road with the lights on, with the door unlocked, with the change already in the drawer, and my name already on the receipt. Let me tell you about the last haul I ever made. My name is Derek Winslow, 53 years old, and I've lived my whole life on Foggy Branch Road in Silver Ridge, Virginia, a town so small it doesn't show up on most maps, about 40 minutes outside of Roanoke, where the Blue Ridge Mountains start to get serious and the fog rolls down like a curtain most mornings. I've been driving a truck since I was 22. Got my CDL the summer after I graduated, and in the 31 years since then, I've logged more miles than most people drive in 3 lifetimes. Route 47 runs right through Silver Ridge, cutting through farmland and small nothing towns, continuing west into the backcountry, where the land flattens into wide open nothing that makes you feel small and alone. I've driven that stretch more times than I can count, know every curve and pothole like the back of my hand. My daddy drove this route before me, and his daddy drove it before him, and I remember sitting at his kitchen table when I was just a boy, listening to him tell stories about the things he'd seen out there, the strange lights and the cold spots and the feeling of being watched when nobody else was around. He told me once that the road has a memory of its own, that it remembers everyone who's ever driven on it, and that sometimes, when the conditions are just right, the road lets things through, things that don't belong here, things that have been waiting for you since before you were born. I laughed it off back then because I was young and didn't believe in ghosts or curses or any of that nonsense. But standing there in that parking lot weeks ago, I started to wonder if maybe my daddy had known something I didn't, had seen something that I was about to see for myself. That night, the fog came in fast and thick, the kind of dense white wall that swallows everything and turns the world into a gray void, and my headlights barely cut through it, making things worse instead of better. I know how to handle fog, been driving through it my whole life, but this felt different, felt wrong, like something was pressing down on my cab, making it hard to breathe, and I remember thinking that if something was going to happen, it was going to happen tonight. That was when I saw the lights appearing out of the murk like a mirage, warm yellow glow growing brighter as I got closer. There was no way there should be lights out here. No way there should be a building in the middle of all this nothing. But as I got closer, I saw a sign above the entrance that read Earl's Place in chrome letters, with a smaller marquee beneath it that said Truckers Welcome, open all night, in faded neon. The parking lot was full of trucks, dozens of them, more than I could count, and every single one had their engines off and their cabs dark, not a single light glowing from any window. I remember thinking how strange that was. How strange it was that none of these trucks seemed to have anyone inside them. But my body was giving out on me. 17 hours on the road will do that to a man. And I figured a bathroom break and maybe some food would help me finish this run and get home. I pulled in and parked my rig near the entrance. And as I stepped out of the cab, the cold hit me right away. A different kind of cold than what I was expecting. Cold that felt damp and thick and seemed to soak right through my skin and settle into my bones. The fog was everywhere, wrapping around me like a wet blanket, and I walked toward the entrance with my hand on the door handle, looking at the other trucks and wondering where all the drivers were, why every cab was dark and silent, why none of these rigs had steam coming out of their exhausts even though the night was cold enough to see your breath in the air. Something felt off about this place, something I couldn't put my finger on, but I was too tired and too desperate to stop, and I pushed open the door and walked inside. The moment I stepped inside, the warmth hit me like a wall, that particular kind of warmth that comes from too many bodies in too small a space, and I was immediately struck by how many people were sitting at the tables and booths. Truckers, at least 40 of them, maybe more, all wearing the same kind of flannel shirts and canvas jackets you see at every rest stop between here and the Canadian border. They were eating, or rather, they had food in front of them, plates of meatloaf and bowls of mashed potatoes and glasses of iced tea, sweating condensation onto the tables, but none of them were actually eating. I watched a man in a red cap lift a fork to his mouth, and then just hold it there, frozen, his jaw slightly open, his eyes fixed on the far wall with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The silence was the worst part, broken only by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional clink of a plate being set down by a waitress who moved like she was underwater and never once looked up from her tray. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back tight, and a face that had no expression whatsoever. The face of someone who had long ago stopped seeing the people she served as human beings. Every single trucker in the room was doing the same thing, sitting motionless with their forks suspended in midair, their eyes locked on that same spot on the far wall. And I felt a coldness spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. I walked to a booth near the entrance because I wanted to be close to the door, a habit you develop when you spend decades on the road and learn that comfort can become a trap. The vinyl seats were cracked and worn. The kind of seats that have held thousands of tired drivers over the years, and I sat down and waited for someone to take my order. The waitress, with the tired eyes, appeared beside me with a laminated menu that was sticky with grease and asked me what I wanted, and I ordered a cup of coffee because that was all I could think of at the moment, my mind still trying to process what I was seeing. These frozen men, and that silent waitress, and the way the air in here felt thick and heavy. The coffee came in a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Dad," in faded letters, and it was the best coffee I had ever tasted. Rich and hot, and exactly what my exhausted body needed. But I could not stop looking at the other truckers, at the way they sat motionless with their forks frozen in place, at the way their eyes never blinked. I followed their gazes to the far wall where a large analog clock hung in a metal frame, and that was when I first noticed that both hands were frozen in place, the long hand pointing at 12 and the short hand pointing at 7. And even as I watched, neither moved, not even a tremor. I looked at my watch and saw that it was 7:04, and I looked back at the clock and saw that it still said 7 o'clock, and I remember thinking that someone probably just forgot to wind it. But something about the way the truckers were staring at it made me feel like it wasn't that simple, like there was a reason they were all looking at it, like something important was supposed to happen at 7 o'clock and never did. I set my mug down and walked past the rows of frozen men, feeling their attention on me even though none of them had turned their heads, feeling it like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. And I stopped at the hallway in the back where the walls were covered in old black and white photographs of truckers standing in front of their rigs, each one with a brass plaque beneath it bearing a name and a date. I ran my eyes along them, reading the names like I was reading a memorial. Names like Bobby Joe Simmons and Earl Washburn, drivers who had vanished on this stretch of Route 47 over the years. Drivers whose trucks were found abandoned on the side of the road with the engine still running and the doors hanging open like someone had stepped out for a moment and never came back. I kept walking along the wall, past the rows of men who never turned their heads to watch me pass, past the counter where the older waitress never stopped wiping the same spot on the dirty formica, and I kept looking at the photographs because something about them made me feel uncomfortable, made me feel like I was being watched from inside the frames. Each photograph had a small brass plaque beneath it with a name and a date, and I ran my eyes along them, reading the names like I was reading a memorial wall, and I recognized some of them because my daddy had told me stories about the men who had disappeared on this stretch of Route 47 during his own years as a driver. There was Bobby Joe Simmons, vanished in 1962 with his rig and a full load of peaches that were never recovered. There was Earl Washburn himself, the legendary driver who the truck stop was supposedly named after, disappeared in 1958, along with 3 other drivers who had been convoying together. There were more, dozens of them, and each face looked like they had been caught in a moment of happiness, unaware that they were posing for a photograph that would hang on a wall for the rest of time as a memorial to someone who would never come home. Some of the plaques had dates from the 1970s and 1980s, some as far back as the early 1950s, and I remember thinking that this place must have been around for a long time, must have been a popular stop for drivers who knew the route. But I also remember thinking how strange it was that I had never heard of it before, never seen it on any map or GPS or road sign, never seen it listed in any of the truck stop directories that drivers keep in their cabs for reference. I kept walking, kept reading, kept feeling that coldness grow inside my chest, and I reached the last frame on the right side of the wall. The frame that held a photograph of a man with broad shoulders and a strong jaw, and dark hair combed back from a high forehead, and I stopped dead in my tracks because the face in that photograph was my face. Not my face as it looked now, aged and weathered by decades of sun and wind and the particular kind of tiredness that comes from a lifetime of driving, but my face as it had looked 30 years ago when I was young and strong and full of the kind of reckless confidence that kills people. The name on the plaque was Derek Winslow, and the date was October 14th, 1974. And I stood there staring at it while the sound of the diner seemed to fade away around me. The hum of the lights and the clink of plates and the soft breathing of the frozen truckers all getting quieter and quieter until the only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I dropped my coffee mug and it shattered on the floor, pieces of ceramic scattering across the linoleum like broken teeth. And the sound was loud and sharp and should have drawn attention from every person in that building. But none of them moved. None of them looked. None of them acknowledged that anything had happened at all. The waitress with the dark hair appeared beside me with a mop and a dustpan, and she swept up the pieces without saying a word, without looking at me. And when she was done, she walked away and left me standing there with my heart pounding in my throat and my hands shaking at my sides. I reached out and touched the glass of the frame, and it was cold. So cold, it burned my fingertips, and I could feel something pulsing behind the glass. Something that felt like a heartbeat, and I knew that this photograph was not just a picture of a man who looked like me. It was a picture of me. Me from a time I had never lived. Me from a year I was not even born yet. Something in my gut told me to leave. That familiar voice that has saved my life more times than I can count. The one that speaks in hunches and gut feelings and the kind of pure animal instinct that humans still carry from their days as prey animals hiding in the dark. I stepped back from the photograph and turned toward the door with my legs shaking beneath me and my mind screaming at me to run. But when I got to the entrance, I grabbed the handle and pulled, and nothing happened. The door was locked, and there was no sound of a lock clicking, no resistance, no struggle. It simply did not open, as if the handle was connected to nothing, as if the door was a painting of a door and not a real door at all, as if this entire building was a facade built to trap people like me. I pulled harder, threw my shoulder against it, beat my fists against the glass, and still nothing, and the people in the diner behind me had not moved, had not reacted, but I could feel their attention on me now, could feel it like a physical weight on my back, the weight of their collective stares pressing down on my spine until I could barely stand. I turned around and faced them, all 40 or 50 of them, still frozen, still staring at the wall, still holding their forks and spoons and cups in positions that seemed to defy the laws of physics. And I saw that some of them were smiling now, smiling without moving their faces, smiling with their eyes in a way that made my stomach clench and my vision blur. I forced myself to walk back to my table, to sit down, to think, because panic would not help me, had never helped anyone, and I needed to understand what was happening before I could figure out how to escape. I looked at the clock again, at the frozen hands, and I realized that the time was exactly 7 o'clock. Had been 7 o'clock when I walked in, and I looked at my watch and saw that it was now 7 o'clock. Had been 7 o'clock 5 minutes ago when I dropped my mug, and I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach that my watch had stopped working at exactly 7 o'clock, that the battery had died at the precise moment I stepped into this place. And I wondered if that was a coincidence or if something had drained the life out of it, the way something was draining the life out of me. I looked around the diner again, at the frozen men and the silent waitresses and the fog pressing against the windows like it was trying to get in. And I understood that something was very wrong with this place, that time itself had stopped in this room, that the people around me had been sitting in this moment for decades, maybe forever, and that I had just become one of them. The older waitress appeared at my elbow, and she was holding a fresh cup of coffee, the same cup I had ordered before, and she said in a voice that was soft and gentle and utterly inhuman, "Drink this, you must be cold." And I looked at her face and saw that her eyes were empty, were holes, were windows into a darkness that had no bottom and no end. I took the cup because my hands were shaking and my mind was screaming, and I did not know what else to do. And the coffee was hot and bitter and tasted like nothing I had ever drunk before. Tasted like the memory of coffee, like the idea of coffee, like a reminder of what coffee used to feel like before I forgot what anything felt like. And as I drank it, I felt something changing inside me, felt my thoughts slowing down, felt my heart stopping its frantic beating, felt my eyes wanting to turn toward the wall where the clock hung in its metal frame, and the hands never moved, and the time never changed. I set the cup down, and I walked toward the photographs on the wall, toward the frame on the right side where a man with broad shoulders and a strong jaw and dark hair looked out at me from behind the glass, and I saw that the date had changed, that it now read June 4th, 2026. Today, this moment, this very moment, and beneath it in fresh black letters was a name that I had never seen before. A name that was written in my own handwriting. A name that was me. I understood then, standing there in the warm light of Earl's Truck Haven, while the fog pressed against the windows and the frozen truckers waited for me to join them, that I had always been here, that I had been driving this route for 50 years, and also for 5 minutes. That time was a circle, and I had finally come back to the place where I had always been. And the clock on the wall moved for the first time in decades, and the short hand ticked forward, and the long hand followed, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a truck engine starting up in the parking lot. Heard it waiting for me, heard it ready to take me home to a place that had been waiting for me since 1974, since before I was born, since the beginning of time. The waitress smiled at me, and it was the first time I had seen anyone in this place smile. And it was the worst thing I had ever seen. A smile that stretched too wide and stayed too long and showed too many teeth. Teeth that were not teeth, but something else, something sharper and darker and wrong. She said, "Your rig is ready, Mr. Winslow." And her voice was the voice of my mother, the voice of my wife, the voice of everyone I had ever loved. And it was not human, had never been human, had only been wearing their voices like masks to lure me deeper into this trap that had been set 50 years ago and had been waiting for me every night since. I walked toward the door, and it opened this time, opened easily, as if it had been waiting for me to want to leave. And the cold air hit my face, and the fog wrapped around me like a blanket, and I walked across the gravel lot to where my truck was parked. And it was not my truck, had never been my truck. It was a rig from 1974 with rust and dents and a CB radio that crackled with static. And I climbed into the cab and sat in the seat and put my hands on the wheel and looked in the rearview mirror and saw that I was young again, was 22 again, was the man in the photograph with broad shoulders and dark hair and no idea what was waiting for him on Route 47. The clock on the wall behind me ticked forward again, and the frozen truckers began to move, and the waitress with the empty eyes wiped a table that would never be clean. And somewhere in the fog, a truck engine started up, and the story began again. And it had no end, had never had an end, would go on forever, because the road remembers everything, and the road never lets anyone leave.